tarot cards are often the first step and basis for a seeker of metaphysical knowledge, like you, to discover your forever path. That could be astrology, numerology, healing arts, or any other spiritual interest you discover along the way. Elaine Ireland is not only a teacher of tarot, she is a mentor who supports you and will be there for you. Visit www.ElaineIrelandTarotMaster.com now and discover how Elaine's mentoring, tarot card and psychic readings, tarot card classes, and more help you to grow into the true being you are meant to be. Welcome to Conversations with the Ancients, where you're about to discover a whole different world than the one that, up until now, you've believed you're familiar with. World-renowned metaphysicist, practicing psychic, and tarot teacher Elaine Ireland invites you on a journey where you'll hear voices from the past, interviews with some of the greatest metaphysicians you've never heard of, because in their time, they needed to move with stealth. You'll also meet today's spirit mediums, healers, and others who will show you a side of the paranormal you've never seen before. Be sure you visit our website at conversationswiththeancients.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, hear the words of metaphysicians who blazed the trail. You're not in jail, thanks to them.
This is Nicole. Say your last name correctly. I always say Coppi, but I don't think that's right.
That's right, Coppi with a long O. It's Italian.
Coppi. That would be Coppi.
That's right.
My maiden name was Anzavino, so I can get by with that. Anzavino. Nicole Coppi. She's out of San Antonio, a lady of many talents. We were just talking pre-conversation, a conversation before the conversation. I think of her as a numerologist, as a psychic. She's very deep and sincerely into her Catholicism, which we're going to talk about, which is going to be a wonderful topic about how she's balanced her Catholicism with her spirituality. Not everybody believes you can do that, so hang on to your hats, folks. And she says she dabbles in astrology. Very good numerologist, has a budding business by the name of
Blue Heart Studio.
And it is yoga and Pilates.
That's right.
And what else?
Well, I mean, we're a community space, so we hold space for a lot of different events. We've got breath circles that are coming through, cacao ceremonies that have been coming through, dance circles, all of the good stuff.
What are the first two that you just said? Slowly say them.
So breath circle,
Okay,
a group circle where we're coming in and breathing to a certain rhythm. I'm actually leaving in August to be trained for a particular breath that's a 3-part breath in and out of the mouth. And it's a holotropic breath. So it's creating a mystical state or a extended non-physical state to journey through. So breath circles of that nature. Cacao ceremonies. So cacao is chocolate at its very rawest form. It's considered plant medicine in the indigenous communities. And so we gather in ceremony to share cacao, which would be heated and warmed in water or milk. And it's a very heart-opening experience in a group. They're really beautiful, beautiful ceremonies. So I'm just the space holder there. I have a lot of different people coming in and offering a lot of different, it's really a space to just offer what's, most near and dear to people's hearts. So what they're most passionate about, what they want to share with everyone. Ecstatic dance and divine feminine movement that is very free flowing. We're also opening space for that. And then, of course, yoga classes of all shapes and sizes, different kinds of, from different types of mobility to very simple to a little bit more athletic. And going into mat Pilates, we have a regular schedule at Blue Heart where you can catch classes pretty much Monday through Sunday.
You're a busy lady.
Yes. Yes.
You have a partner or you have a support system or both?
We have a team. So we have a team of five more teachers. So there's me as the owner. I have a co-founding teacher who opened the space along with me named Ashley. And then we have 4 additional yoga teachers. I have an IT person, someone who's working branding. So we've created and cultivated a little community that are all coming in and taking classes and kind of feeding the larger, feeding the larger entity, which is Blue Heart Studio.
Where do you want Blue Heart Studio to take you, or to take your devotees? Where do you want that to go?
Well, Blue Heart initially started because I wanted to teach whatever I wanted to teach and call it, whatever I wanted to teach, whenever I wanted to teach it. And I wanted to be able to call it whatever I wanted to call it. And so in that way, I was starting to merge yoga and my master's degree in Christian spirituality, and really wanted to have a space where I could teach these things I was learning from my master's degree, Lectio Divina, which is a way of sitting with the gospel. It doesn't even have to be the gospel reading. It could be, a Sanskrit reading. It could be a reading. It's a contemplative way of taking a piece of, again, the gospel or a poem and sitting with it and allowing that piece of literature or that piece of reading to unfold within you. That's Lectio Divina, practice of Lectio Divina. So bringing that forward, bringing what is really pulling at my heart with the teachings of and the embodiment of and the study of Mary Magdalene as a disciple of Christ, and presenting that in a way. And I didn't feel that I could go into maybe someone else's yoga studio and say, oh, hey, I want to teach this thing. It's very, it's steeped in Catholicism in your yoga studio without feeling like I might get some pushback. So it occurred to me to just open up my own space. And that's how it started. I came across Blue Heart because Blue Heart to me is like the feminine sacred heart. So I didn't feel right calling and monetizing or the Sacred Heart, because the Sacred Heart is something that I feel is just too beloved and it's too sacred to kind of call my business that. So the Blue Heart came from that. It's the Blue Heart is the divine heart of feminine wisdom. You could also look at that as Sophia in the biblical terms. They have Sophia wisdom. And so I was kind of calling back to that Sophia wisdom, which I believe is the wisdom of the feminine, the wisdom of embodiment, the wisdom of nature, the wisdom of mother. And the Blue Heart is a testament to that. It is the sacred heart of the divine feminine and the Sophia wisdom. So that's how Blue Heart kind of came to be. I do believe in terms of where I'm going, I know very deeply and sincerely that this is my life's work. I'm not exactly sure where we're going just yet. I'm getting like little hints and little threads that I'm kind of chasing down. One of those biggest threads right now is, as we're talking about in the conversation, before the conversation, Mary Magdalene, the study of discipleship through the embodiment of Mary Magdalene and what that means. For me, that means sitting in grief and possibly even death work, because we know that Mary Magdalene sat by the foot of the cross. We know that Mother Mary sat by the foot of the cross. And I have this, again, I suspect that part of some of the work that those women did at the cross when Jesus died was to be with him and to see him through to the further shore. And so I feel like that is part of the Magdalene Council or the Magdalene wisdom. And so grief is part of that as well. That's something that's really been calling, it's not something I want to do, but it just seems to be kind of inherent in the experience of life and the death work. So that's part of it. Aside from that, I still work in sobriety. I myself am sober and have been I just hit my 4-year anniversary, which is July 1st. I know I'm real excited about that too. But just kind of, there's some I call it sober yoga, and just working with individuals who are coming through and using some of the yogic techniques to, take the edge off, as it were. So you kind of that.
Wait, okay. Is anyone else doing that, or is that something you've created?
I'm sure.
Making-
Well, I know that there and in recovery, there's quite a bit of yoga in recovery, whether that's like inpatient or IOP outpatient, where people are coming in to do yoga. And the wording of that, as far as I know, that's just always been the wording I've used, because that's just been true for me in my experience. So we're holding, we're on hiatus right now. We're starting another sober yoga. I think we're going to start doing them in series of like 6 or 8 weeks, where we take a group through somebody who's in recovery or sober curious if they're not in recovery yet, but or just working through some addiction, whether that is codependency, or you have the things that are also not drug related but are also heavily addictive, like gambling, shopping, pornography, all of these things that take pain away in one way or another, even if they're not necessarily substance. And so I would qualify all of those things under some sort of addiction or recovery. So we're looking at, there's one of the new teachers who came in to work at Blue Heart also works and is in recovery. And so we're putting our heads together right now to create something that is probably more, again, in this like working in series of like 4, 6, 8 weeks with a couple of weeks off. And that's just bringing the yogic tools. For me, that's specifically Kundalini yoga, those tools to help people through those times of like heavy, well, it's not even like through the times of heavy desire or heavy, I don't know the word I'm looking for at the moment, but just those times of when they're caught up and they're kind of looking for something and they don't want to go back to using or drinking or whatever it is, giving them tools in their toolbox, which are breathing sequences, mantras, and things like that to help them get through and over that time and get them supported, if that's making sense.
Tell people what. Okay, first of all, you use the term Kundalini yoga.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to know what that is, but a lot of people don't. I don't know what the other types of yoga is available for, not only the repairing your body exercise, but for the soul as well. Explain to people what different kinds of yoga is available through your studio and what those kinds of yoga practices can bring to a person if they're open to, besides just being more limber.
Yeah. Well, the you won't necessarily find at Blue Heart Studio, you won't necessarily find what we'd consider fitness yoga. So that's going to be a lot of the heated classes that are there to really build up a sweat and to like contort the body or to build strength. That's not necessarily the way that we lean into yoga at Blue Heart. It's more of a meeting people where they are. And from my experience, what I have seen of people in general who are coming in and out of either yoga or Pilates is that our central nervous system is very taxed in the modern world. So our attention is being called to many things all of the time, whether that's, television, advertising. We have computers in our pockets and we're always scrolling, or, when it comes to, just to throw it back to addiction, the biggest addiction that I think people have now is modern living. And our central nervous system is not necessarily prepared for that kind of stimulation. So the yoga that you'll find at Blue Heart is going to be more toward down regulation of the central nervous system. So it's going to be more breath heavy. So we're focused more on the breath and maybe the big postures. And, the body is a definite tool that we're going to be utilizing in yogic poses, but it's more about breathing into the poses and more about relaxation type style yoga. Now, those styles tend to vary a little bit. We have a yin yoga practice, which is more long holds. So holding a pose for anywhere from 2 to 4 minutes with long, deep breathing, to then be able to explore the deeper experiences of your own self, whether that is emotions that are coming up, thoughts that are coming up, sensations, any of those kinds of things. So we're really deepening into that non-physical space that is much larger than our physical space. So that's going to happen in yin yoga. We have some flow classes, some slow flow classes, which will be typical in moving in and out of poses with the breath. But in a slow, kind of calm, kind manner, not really trying to achieve much of anything, but just finding a nice coordination of the body, the breath, and a nice little union there. That's most of the asana or the posture practices that we offer are going to be more in that kind of down-regulating, slower, relaxing, resting kind of feel, if you will. Kundalini yoga is very different. Kundalini yoga is the yoga of awareness. And so Kundalini, I mean, all yoga for the most part is geared more toward sitting in prayer longer, right? Like it's when yoga came to the West, it's kind of been marketed as like fitness, but the truest intent of yoga means union. And so or it means to yoke or to bring into union. And we're talking about being in union with the body, mind, breath, spirit, soul, like being in union with all that there is within each one of us. And the posture practice is really there so that we can sit in meditation and prayer longer. We're just really preparing the body so that we can go deeply into meditation or prayer for a longer period of time. And Kundalini is very much geared toward an energetic practice. So it's more about moving energy through the body or the chakra system, and by way of postures, by way of breathing exercises, by way of mantra, by way of breath. And the reason that Kundalini is so profound with people who are working in and with addiction is that there are multiple points of focus. So when we're doing a Kundalini practice, you could be focused on a mantra in your mind, something that you're saying over and over. You're focused on a breathing pattern. And then you're focused on like a mudra of some sort, whether that's a finger point or taking your eyes up to your third eye, or curling your tongue up to the roof of your mouth, and you have a posture for your body. So there's many different points of focus. And it's like when we come in from this very scattered place and answering text messages and answering emails, and this person needs this and this person needs this, it's like we're taking that scattered energy and we're bringing it into these focal points that are all taking us to the divine. So when you have more than 3 or 4 focal points, there is no room in your mind for thoughts to come up and thoughts to drift in and drift out because you've got so many focal points. So for the person who says like, oh, I can't meditate, like I can't still my mind, something like Kundalini will prove them, it's going to take all of those different focal points and bring them into that one central place. So it can be extremely rewarding in that it's connecting all of these different parts of ourselves in a single practice.
Now, you just talked what I heard. You're talking about a religion in a physical form to me because of you kept using the word focal. How does that work with and weave through a structured religion as deep as Catholicism, when they're both religions and they work well together because of the devotion, in my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, because of the devotion that is demanded on spirit that we walk around with? How does that work? How did you make that work? You're highly educated. And many, I don't even have a clue as to how many years you have been practicing yoga from the first day you walked into a studio or popped a DVD in to learn it to today, where you are now a business owner sharing your expertise. You've been a Catholic all of your life. How did you get from that deep of a structure in Catholicism, wove the Mary Magdalene studies, the Sophia studies, at the same time you're working with a very open-minded but yet demanding of devotion methodology of yoga? How did you do that?
Oops,
I bounced that one on you, didn't I?
And it's still, it's still coming to be. It's still coming to be. So, I wouldn't, just a little bit of my background, like I was born into a Catholic family, but I didn't have a very structured spiritual upbringing. So you have in the Catholic Church, you have the sacraments that you receive as you get older. And so I went up within the working of Catholicism at about 10 years old. In second grade, I had my first communion. And then I didn't continue forward with the sacraments after that. My family stopped going to church for whatever reason. And so my spiritual formation kind of stopped at the age of 10. And I got into, I've just been a student and I've been a seeker since I was a really young kid. In high school, I was reading about Buddhism and wasn't studying much in the Catholic or Christian church at all. I've studied Scientology. I went with the Church of Scientology and studied Scientology for a short time. I was really like, especially in my early 20s, it was like, where is my teacher? Where is my teacher? Where is my teacher? And so I was going everywhere, by like just biting into a little bit of like, is this it? And like, Scientology, is this it? And I was like, it gave me some good tools, but no, that wasn't it. And so I've been seeking for quite some time. I started practicing yoga when I got out of the military. It was about mid-20s. And that what was powerful about yoga at that time is that I felt in my body, after a yoga practice, I felt peace in my body. Like I felt it viscerally. The felt sensation of peace is what I felt. And that was very profound because I had never felt that before. I wasn't a person who could walk into church and I could feel the Holy Spirit come over me, and I felt at peace and I felt at one with Jesus. Like that wasn't happening for me at that time. Our 20s are very physical times in our lives anyway. And so I needed the physical yoga practice, and the breath was really profound for me because my thought in my mid to late 20s was, why can't I just leave myself alone? Like there was this consistent, like, I just couldn't leave myself alone, whether it was my inner judge or my inner critique or, whatever that was. And so to yoga, I would breathe louder than the thoughts in my head. And when I would breathe louder than the thoughts in my head, my mind would get quiet. And that was something that I couldn't get anywhere else, or at least I hadn't up to that point. And so it was at that point that I was like, I know I need to be a yoga teacher. I need to share this with other people. And so I started teacher training at that point. So this takes me into my late 20s, went right into a Kundalini teacher training right after that. And my central nervous system was not ready for Kundalini, and I had a lot of affective fallout, I will say, because you really, in Kundalini, when you're doing the kind of breath work that you're doing, if you have imbalances in your nervous system, it expands all of the imbalances. And so my imbalances kind of took over, and I had to put Kundalini away for a time. And so that was a really interesting experience to have. And helpful in teaching it to other people, especially in recovery, because if we have been treating our bodies in such a way for so long, you can bet there's going to be imbalances in the central nervous system. So having to navigate with that with my teachers and with my own self has been very helpful in helping others do the same. And to go easy, especially in the beginning, and not go, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So little pieces. So really informative there. I came back into Catholicism by way of a breath circle. So I talked a little earlier about the breath circle, the shamanic breath circle, the holotropic breathing that I'm now kind of going full circle and getting certified in. And I was taken to the foot of the cross through the embodiment of Mother Mary during a mystical experience through a breath circle. And that changed everything. That absolutely changed everything. I was taken to the light of Jesus Christ in that mystical experience, and I wept and I cried like we as adults don't allow ourselves to cry. And shed so much weight off of my shoulders and so much weight out of my spirit that I turned around right after that and went into my confirmation, which was the next sacrament in the Catholic Church. So I confirmed into the Catholic Church. And then about 2 months later, I started my master's degree in Christian spirituality. Now, I will say that when I went into my studies with the church, I had this voice in my head, and I don't know if it's like the society's voice, that I couldn't be a yogi and in Christianity at the same time. And so I felt as if I needed to kind of let go of yoga a little bit. And for the most part, I did. I never stopped my own practice. Because those practices in place are what got me to where I was in terms of like my breathing exercises, my meditations and things like that. I couldn't stop that because it was it was just so healing and so healthy for me, and it remains to be so. Went through my studies and the studies were just, beautiful, amazing. I was studying contemplative Catholic saints, if you will, St. John of the Cross, St. Teresa of Avila, just all of these different types of spirituality, all under like the Catholic umbrella, that were just, spoke to my heart and were just really so powerful. And I'm still finding my way through all of that. I haven't written my master's thesis yet. And I haven't yet. And so I'm still, and I know that Mary Magdalene and embodiment is all part of that. And so I'm still trying to decipher through, what is in my heart to bring forward in terms of my thesis. Now, I will say that yoga, what Eastern tradition and what Western tradition do well, are different, right? So the yogic tradition, the Eastern tradition, is what I would call the downward path, or the path into the body, right? So yeah, it's the path into the body. It's the path into the person. And so what yoga was giving me was the path into my body, because everything lands in the body. And what the Western tradition does, what Christianity does very well, is the spirit. It's the upward path, the ascension, right? And so it's like bringing those, and we need both. We need both. We need the downward path into the body, and we need the ascension. We need the new life, the upward path into spirit. And so Christianity doesn't do the downward path well. You can see that in a lot of disembodied teachings that the Christian church will have, where, it's not about this life, but it's about the life in heaven. Or it's not like, or you will receive the fruits in heaven, but it's both, because Jesus came in body. Jesus is the Son of God, and he had a human body. He was man. He was made of earth. He came through a womb, right? The gateway of the womb, which all humans do. And he had a body. And so the downward path is just as necessary as the upward path. And so I'm really grateful for the way that I came into all of these things, because both of them are necessary. And when we get into the downward path, and I see this a lot in plant medicine, people who are doing plant medicine, as they get really into the downward path and the earthiness of it, and you can see it in someone who doesn't have a connection to an ascension and to new life. It's almost like they wither away and die, when we all do, but they wither away. And the thing that I always think of, or I see, is like a tree that is decaying from the inside out, and we all will. And it's the upward path, the knowing of the spirit and the connection that never does die, that keeps us bright even as, the body begins to fall away. And so we need both. And it's like, if you continue down one path into just the body, we won't experience new life. We won't experience ascension. We won't experience that really profound and expansive connection with God. And it's the same if you move just straight into the ascension. We aren't able to take care of ourselves and our body, the people around us, and the earth, which I think is a thing that Catholicism almost like forgets about. Like we've been given domain over the earth, And at a certain point, all we've done is strip her bare and not actually care for her, right? And that's a disembodied Christianity, right? We need to recognize the path of the body and the path of nature, the path of mother, and that is an embodied experience. So we need both, if that's making sense.
It does. And you've answered the question how it worked for you. You, as a soul, needed both the Catholic religion. You needed an organized religion of sorts. But it wasn't just organization. It was what was in the church itself. It's almost like you overlooked the command of the church, the commands that it gives people to live by. Instead, you went right to the heart, right to the meat of what the religion was about. And you did it in a way that you took the woman's path, which they're not included in the Bible enough. There are so many women that are left out of the Bible. Any Bible. I don't care what the Bible is. And that's already been proven by the researches of the ancients. But you also honored the body in the form of your yoga studies. And that's necessary too. But when I was introduced to yoga, which was back in my 20s, and I did not keep up with it, I would have to start all over again. And I certainly don't have the body to do it anymore. I have to be a gentle yoga. But to me, it was an East Indian religion. I truly believed that it was an East Indian religion that was in the form of taking care of the body. Like you said a while ago, you're not going to find that in your studio. You're going to find a soul/spiritual training that the body uses, but it also teaches. So, which is the same thing that you found in religion, but in a different way. And now I can see how you managed to make them fit together. It was because you personally needed both. So you found a way to honor both. And I don't mean to make this sound selfish, but you made use of both in order for your soul to grow and, frankly, your body to survive and not be psychologically damaged. You fought addiction, whatever that was. You've been sober for 4 years, which is wonderful. Yay for you, because now you can see Earth more clearly. But you had to go through that addiction so you could see spiritually more clearly and what it was all about for you, and even your religion. I can't help but feel, and this is not a judgmental statement, do not take that, Nicole, or public, that organized religion was a little harder on you than yoga was, but yet you walked away from yoga because you were honoring the belief systems of your Catholic Church. And I don't mean to be picking on the Catholic Church, but that's what Nicole is. She's Catholic. It just seemed like you did walk away from that until you could rectify and be at peace with the church so you could continue to combine. And now I can't see you ever giving either one of them away or walking away from either one of them. It just seems like you've learned how to commit to both.
Yeah, when I do find myself in currently studying more of the Gospels and studying more of the biblical text than I probably do the Eastern text. But I will also say the one thing that I recognize in Jesus Christ and in all of his disciples is that when we read the Gospels, or when I read the Gospels, the thing that I'm looking at all the time is nature as a character in the gospel setting. Was what we have to recognize, again, when I talk about modern life being the most addicting thing in our experience now, is that Jesus didn't have to, our Jesus' central nervous system and the central nervous system of the disciples, they were always in nature, right? Nature was a huge character. They were going out, they were foraging, the women were foraging for food, they were living out in nature. A lot of the disciples, they were camping when they were going through town to town. And so these human bodies were always in sync with nature. And that's one thing that we don't have any longer. We are so removed from nature, and nature is the one thing that will automatically balance the central nervous system, right? And so what I recognize that yoga has done in a profound, beautiful way that I'm so grateful for is that it has helped me down-regulate my central nervous system, because the connection between the human and the divine is in the central nervous system. It is the parasympathetic nervous system. And if we're in sympathetic, meaning fight or flight, we're not going to be able to hear the still small sound of God's voice. So there has to be a calming, a down regulating, thoughts being quiet, a being in a place of receptivity to be able to receive the voice of God, to be able to receive the voice of spirit. And that has served to be my yoga practice, my breath practice. That has been the down regulation that I can then sit in meditation, or I can sit in prayer. Now, for people who were around the disciples, they didn't need that because they were in nature all the time. They were one with the mother all the time. And so they were they were in this, I wouldn't say all the time. I'm sure they had stressful experiences, but it was easier to regulate your central nervous system when you're in and around nature. And we just don't have that now. And so we need to find a way to come into a sense of, rest and relaxation where we can receive the voice of God, or, the hints and the urges of spirit.
How do you explain to your yoga practice, the part of you that is yoga, the instrument that is yoga? How do you explain to that part of your being that you have to that you had to step away? You will probably have to step away in the future and not have that yoga feel neglected. And do you have to start over again when you do that, or pick up at a certain point when you do that? Yoga and some forms of religion are very forgiving when it comes to that. And God is supposed to be non-judgmental. I would assume, and perhaps I'm right or wrong, that yoga is forgiving as well. But at the same time, if you put a yoga into a physical form and you give it substance, it's going to have a feeling of its own. Am I correct? Because it becomes a part of you. So it's like telling a part of you, I got to leave you for a while. How did you come, or did you recognize that when you stepped away at that time? It's like telling the kid inside, I got to leave you for a while. I may or may not be back.
So much of my formation has been like from so much of my formation is yoga. And one of the things that I recognize is that probably one of the reasons I became a yogi is because I couldn't become a monk. And it's like, and
oh, wait, say that again. No, I'm serious.
Yeah. One of the reasons I became a yogi is because I couldn't become a monk.
Now tell people what a yogi is. She didn't say yoga. She said yogi. So explain what a yogi is.
Yeah, well, in an ancient practice, like a yogi is someone who goes out onto a mountain. They give up their entire life, and they go into they go out and become like almost a hermit. And they practice their yogas, right? They practice their pranayams, they practice their postures. And the ancient form of the yogi was taking themselves out of society and going up on a hillside as a hermit and finding a connection to union, finding a connection to God, finding a connection to, all that ever was, all that ever will be. That's an ancient form of the yogi.
Okay, and then you use the term monk. How is a monk different or alike in the shadow of, or not in the shadow of, but standing beside a yogi?
They're very similar because a monk, and we still have monks, in the Catholic Church today. Monks are in the Catholic Church. There's also monks in Hindu, and, there are monks across many different religious platforms, but I'll stick to what I know, which is going to be the Catholic Church. We still have monks in the Catholic Church. And so a monk in a Catholic Church is going to give up their life. They're going to take vows of celibacy, just like a yogi would. They're going to take vows of celibacy. They're going to take a vow into priesthood for some of them, and sometimes a vow of silence. And they're going to go off with other people who are doing exactly that same thing. They're living outside of, modern life. They don't have television. They're not listening to the radio, but they're going into hours of, they're waking up in the morning to do their spiritual practice. They're together and chanting. They're together and eating in silence. So their life is really for prayer or for meditation. And so in terms of the ancient yogi and even the modern monk, there's a lot of similarities there, that they're both stepping away from modern society. They're both taking themselves, or they're pulling themselves apart and they're moving into a space that is God-centered. It's focused on God. And a lot of those practices are even very similar. A yogi would chant, Catholic monks chant the Psalms, as well as in different languages, usually Latin or Greek. But, there are a lot of similarities in that.
Every time you say monk, I think of the hermit card in the tarot cards, because he stands there with a lamp with a star in the middle of it. And of course, he has what we in today's society think a monk would wear in terms of the robe, with maybe, in his case, he has a hood on. But yet a yogi, in my imagery, has little clothing on, perhaps a swath around the bottom part, perhaps the legs are covered, perhaps a shawl over one shoulder. And that to me is the dressing, almost declaring, I really don't need this, but I wear it because I'm not supposed to walk around nude in public, where a monk covers themselves completely. So that's almost like the yin and the yang of religion. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
What am I not seeing? What am I not seeing that I should be seeing?
I think the most important thing, that the through line that runs through both of them, is it's an ascetic being. Like they're taking and they're shunning the world away, in both a yogi and a monk. And their sole focus is to be in connection and union with God.
And they do it in similar but totally socially and culturally different ways. But are they really different? Yogi, I have never known of a yogi text. Is there a yogi text?
A yogic text, absolutely. So Patanjali, the Yoga Sutras, those are sutras sutra is like a thread to weave. And so there are sutras that you can read. The first sutra is Yoga Chitti, what is it? Yoga is the cessation of the fluctuation of the mind, is the very first sutra. And so there's these little, in a similar way that you would read and sit with a psalm, you're going to sit with a yoga sutra and discover what that means for you, how to embody that, how to live that out in your life. It would be a similar way that a monk would sit with the scriptures to find out how to embody that piece of knowledge, how to live it, how to express it in their life and their communications with the people around them.
Thank you so much for that knowledge. Gosh, I'm learning so much from these conversations. But I have the Tao that Wayne Dyer put together. He took a Tao and then he did an essay on them. But he went back as far as he could go to get the proper Tao, because, over generations, things get rewritten so that the current population can understand it. If we all had to live and speak like Shakespeare, we'd all be lost. But I understand why the change happens. But he went back as far as he could go. And I studied those and read his essays. He did not try to interpret that at all. It was his meditation explanations. And I found them very interesting. What I'm hearing you say is there is an Eastern and a Western description. They're the scriptures, and then there's the other. But where does something like the Tao work into all of that, which was a way of life for many, was encouraged to be the way of life? Is that on the yoga side, the yogi side? Or
for
those? Yes.
I mean, it started with the yogic side, and what's so interesting is that you want to talk about things that are shared. Another thing that is shared between the two sides is purity. It happens more on the yoga side as like cleanliness. And it's like my studies of the sutras and my studies of the yoga philosophy were so impactful in my 20s that it just informs what I do in Catholicism and what I'm doing in religion. Like, I mean, if you were to walk into my condo, like, I don't have a television, I don't have Netflix, I don't have any, like, I've done my best to create a little hub of quiet, right? Because that's kind of the through line. Again, like, I thought, I became a yogi because I couldn't become a monk, and I've always taken those things, and I've really taken it to heart. And it's like, I want to live a life that is in union with God. And a lot of that has just been like shutting the world out. And not completely, but it's like when I'm home, like I'm in my I'm in my sanctuary, and that has a certain feel to it, has a certain smell to it, has a certain vibration to it, and that is that has been inspired by both the yogic practices and the Western practices of Catholicism. And so it's hard for me, like at a certain point when you're braiding something, and you're just like, if my life were this braid, so much of my 20s and my spiritual formation is the yogic texts and is the understanding and the evolution and the expansion from the Eastern texts, that it's just inherent in who I am. And so it's like I couldn't unweave the yogic out of me because it has been so informative. I mean, it's been so informative into how I learn in the in the Catholic Church. In the Catholic Church, in Catholic spirituality, you have what they call a contemplative. And I 100% consider myself a contemplative. And the contemplative, again, is this person who sits in quiet and union with God. It's the same as the yogi, but it's just like it's the same thing, but it just is, it's reading a different scripture, and I don't, I'm sure I would upset some people to say that it's the same thing, right? Because in Christianity and in Catholicism, we're talking about Jesus as King and Jesus as my Savior, which I am 100%. Jesus is my Savior, and but the way that I walk as a disciple with Jesus is informed by my yogic practice. And it's like I can't unweave those things. I can't take those two things apart. And I don't think that I would want to, because being a student of yoga has now taught me how to be to be a contemplative, to be a student of Christ. Like the one thing informed the other. So I don't think there is any taking those things apart. Like I might not do a downward facing dog, and I might not do a warrior two, but it's like, but the postures of yoga are such a small thing in the larger scope of yoga. And it's like that. And then when we see like people taking out what is needed or necessary from both the Eastern and the Western, people look at yoga and it's like, oh, well, it's just the postures, but that's only a small part. And people look at Catholicism and they say, oh, well, it's just the Mass. And that's just a small part. So it's like what these two things embody, whether you wanted to study one or both, or whether one study led into another study, they're much larger holistic paths that is just limited by the postures, and it's just limited by saying, oh, I'm Catholic, I go to Mass. Like it's so much more than Mass. It's so much more than the priesthood. It's like being a disciple, a true disciple, is so much more than what we would kind of categorize Catholicism to be.
Time frames. How far back does the yogi literature go compared to the Bible in its first forms?
I don't know exact time frames, but I'm going to say much further, which leads me to a really interesting question.
Which one? Much further. Yogi? Yogi?
Yoga. Yeah.
Yogi. Okay.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that yogi would lead Christianity, and that may be that would be an interesting thought.
This is the thing that I am like, the thought line that I'm stuck on right now is, Jesus changed, I think Jesus changed the world. It's not even I think, it's like when Jesus died, the timeline shifted, and it's the timeline of the earth that shifted, right? The timeline, it went from before Christ, BC, to after death, right? And the full timeline, it didn't just change for Christians, it changed for the entire earth. And so when we look at the scriptures, the New Testament, the Old Testament into the New Testament, there's a word for breath that they use in the Old Testament. And when Jesus died and ascended and brought down the Holy Spirit, the word for breath changed, because what was the breath before Jesus, after Jesus, was the Spirit. So Jesus changed the breath into spirit and gave us direct, direct. It's called pneuma, Pneuma, after Christ. Now, the thing that I wonder, knowing that there was like a timeline shift and that the breath changed from breath into spirit once Jesus had ascended into the Christ and sent down the Holy Spirit, my question is, because I've only ever known a world where I have known spirit. What was the world like before Jesus? What was the connection with God like before Jesus? And I don't know that. And nobody living here probably does, because all we've ever known is spirit. So my question then becomes like, before Jesus came, what was our spirituality? What was our connection to God? Could we hear the still voice of God? I don't know that, but it would make sense to have such a rigorous practice like yogis did. You know, yogis had to they had to completely go away. They had to go down. They ate very little. They didn't have sex. They didn't, nothing like that, so that they could be in connection with God. And it's
not
like
Jesus, they're God.
In God, right.
Right. That went Jesus. Right straight to God.
Right. Right. And then Jesus came, changed breath into spirit. And now we have this connection to God through the Spirit of Christ. And what did that feel like before Jesus, changed the world? I don't know, but that's something that I try to imagine that and I just can't. But I find it fascinating.
It's interesting to me that for some reason, please don't be mad at me, public. For some reason, God thought he had to deflect. Did God think that he had to deflect a total cultural, for lack of a better word, devotion to him by or her, again, don't be mad at me, public, and send down almost a distraction in Jesus? He had a group of people that lived a certain way with total and complete devotion. Did he send down Jesus? And I'm not a biblical expert, so the answer is probably already there. In order to take the idolism that part of the world was doing, the idols, the golden idols, the whatevers. Did he do it that way and just say, okay, we're just all going to put it in this form called Jesus? You people over here, you're doing great. You're doing great, yogis. Let's just put everybody under yogi. Although there were millions of cultures around that. But he had this group over here. But there was also a group of people over here that was idolizing everything from green leaves to golden bulls to... Did he send Jesus down for that group and that group alone? Now we're getting into a whole lot of religious discussion. Maybe off track, maybe not. Oh, we've got Jewish over here who don't believe in Jesus. They honor him as a prophet. I respect that. And then we've got organized religion over here from 12 different tribes. Or more. No, just 12. 12 different tribes. That even in those 12 tribes have offshoots. Because women seem to always create what they want because it's not out there and they don't want to conform to it. Like people didn't want to conform to just the Catholic Church. Some people don't want to be just Baptist. How many wings of the Baptist Church do we have? Oh my goodness. Episcopalian, they didn't want to be holy Catholic, so they just kind of sprung off and said, yeah, we're going to follow the Catholic way, but our people can get married. Sure. So, and then there's always been this fight about what women can do in any church. That's man-made. That's man, M-A-N, human. I tend to use man as a human phrase, but it can get a little bit confusing.
It can.
When you're looking at in your case, you're devoted beyond need to be. You're devoted because you want and need to be in your own light. Nobody's telling you have to do it. and you have found a way to explain how you make both meet because of your historical research and acknowledgement of the yogi method of life and how it fits with your belief system in Catholicism. That's not easy. And you've done it in a very aware, A-W-A-R-E, aware methodology, which I find fascinating. You should be teaching a class on this.
I mean, it's still evolving. The whole process is really still evolving, and it shifts, and that's all I can really say. And there's nothing more interesting to me. There's absolutely nothing more interesting to me than living a life that is connected to God. There's nothing more rewarding, nothing more interesting.
You acknowledge it with a great deal of awareness. I know people that walk around and they live in what they call God's shadow, or they walk with God, or they walk with Jesus. They make the statement and that's the way it is. You make the statement and you live it and walk it a different way every day because you function because of it. Some people go to church. We're okay. We go to church. I tell people jokingly, but I mean it. If we can acknowledge 5 of the 10 commandments every day, we're doing pretty good. We're doing pretty good. Thou shalt not kill. Okay, I've got that one covered every day. Unless it's an accident, I'm not purposely killing anybody. Honor thy mother and their father. Sure. Both of mine are gone, but I still honor them. Got that covered. Okay, that's 2 out of 10. Right there. Thou shalt not covet. Well, every time you give I was taught that every time you give a compliment, it could be interpreted as a covet. That is a pretty blouse you're wearing today. Well, I think I'll just give it off and give it to you. In some cultures, that's what would happen because that's the way they were brought up. If someone admires something, they're respecting you and admiring your taste and yada, yada, yada. You're supposed to give it to them. If I don't give anyone a compliment all day, I've got number 3 covered. So there are different ways of walking with our religion. Whatever church we've been brought up in, you were brought up until the age of 10 or so in the Catholic Church. I had a different thing because living on a military base, there was only one building that was called church. Just one building. And it wasn't even a very big one. And sometimes on some Sundays, people were sitting in metal chairs with the door open so they could hear the sermon outside. Or they would crowd in there was no heating and air conditioning on those days. And as a kid, I don't know how to explain this. As a kid, and I was a kid then, came back when I was 12, I would go with a group of like-aged kids. We didn't get paid for doing this. We helped the different religions set the church up if it was appropriate. We couldn't do it for Pentecost, but and we didn't do it for the 3 American Indians that were in the army that met at midnight, which I thought was interesting. Sometimes before sunrise. But we would tear down sound equipment. We would rearrange the altar. We would whatever we were allowed to do, we would do. There were a couple of us that would stay for a particular service. I would stay for the Baptist service. But I learned a lot about religions because I got to do that, which meant I got to see the tools that they used during their services, how the candles were set up, how the communions were set up, all of that. And then sometimes we were allowed to stay for the service. But if we did, we had to sit at the back. And if chairs were available, we could sit in the chairs. If not, we sat on the floor. And then we would get up and jump up and start changing things around under the direction, of course, of adults. But eventually you get to know automatically. I would be there until 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, sometimes later. And then my friends and I would go to a movie. Now, we didn't get paid for this. We did it because we wanted to learn. And I was a kid doing that and thought it was great fun every Sunday. Other kids thought we were all crazy. They tease us about it. But in that group, there were all kinds of religions. But I think looking back, one building carried the energy of those services. Started with a Catholic service before sunrise for that, and ended with a mass, not every Sunday. I think that was arranged between the other religions. And then the three American Indians would come in, sometimes at midnight, sometimes at sunrise, before sunrise, because they had their duties to take care of. Of course, we weren't there. We were long gone and getting ready to go to bed and go to school. But there was service in there until sunset every Sunday, and sometimes on Saturday, depending on the religion. So what I saw and what I heard was so similar and yet so different. And I thought at the time, Mother had taught me about judgment. You don't judge people, my grandparents and my mother. You don't gossip, and you don't say, well, they're Episcopalian. What can you expect? They're this, they're that. You know. And the whole thing was, until you've studied it and you've walked in their shoes, you don't know. And you don't have a right to declare that religion or that belief system is wrong. It may not go along with your system, but that doesn't make it wrong. And that's why I was so fascinated and just so honored that you have shared your way of weaving it together, East and West. And you found a way to honor the ancient text of yogi that came before Jesus hit the ground, so to speak. But yet there was a God, although there were many gods in the form of idols before Jesus got here. And yet you have found a way of accepting basically all three, knowing probably on some level that God is God to the yogi, just like God is God to non-yogis. It's just a different name for an energy. This has been an education. Well, we're not done yet. I'm not letting you go yet. Are you ready to shift over to Mary Magdalene?
Sure, I'd love to.
Let's shift over to Mary Magdalene. What is it you want, and what are you putting together in her name? The circles that you're putting together in her name?
Yeah, we have so her feast day just passed. It was maybe a week and a half ago on a Monday, this past Monday, the Monday prior to. And I started the Council of Magdalene, which is I'm still, again, I'm following a thread, and I'm seeing how it's all kind of opening up and what it leads to. Now, what I suspect when it comes to Mary Magdalene is, Mary Magdalene has been known as many different things. A lot of people know her as a prostitute. That happened from St. Gregory and years and years and years ago, called her a prostitute, and that has just always kind of stuck. And what I know of Mary Magdalene as a disciple is that in the Catholic Church, in some circles, she's known as the apostle to the apostles. It's rumored that she was Jesus' favorite disciple, Jesus' favorite apostle. And some other things that I know about Mary Magdalene, we know in a very brief way that Jesus dispelled 7 demons from her. And I find that to be so interesting, and I want to know so much more about that. And it's really just a simple sentence in the gospel, and it doesn't really say anything more about it. But the fact of a lot of people at least on the studying side, on the academic side, when I've been studying about the 7 demons that were dispelled from her, they kind of assume that it was one of each of the 7 deadly sins. And so it's really kind of like thrown me into this study of demons. What is a demon? When does a sin evolve into a demon? When is a demon something that we have ourselves created, perhaps as protectors, as young children, where we are protecting ourselves from something. And then as we have reached an age of maturity, that same protector is now getting in the way of our deeper connections with other people. And so it's almost like a self-created demon that at one time was very useful. And now it is something that needs to be a protector that needs to be reassigned. So that's something that's really interesting for me, especially when it comes into this idea of her having been a prostitute, or we can like loosen that up a little bit and call it a sexual sin. right? If there was some sort of a sexual sin that was even given unto her, or she had herself. I wonder what was put upon her, because Mary Magdalene in the Gospels was, she was a single woman. She had no children, and yet she had financial independence, which is something very rare among women in that time. And so I wonder some of the times of what was put upon her, because she was different from what other women would have been perceived or asked to have been. And so all of these things are things that I ask and I consider, and I'm studying and I'm writing about, because I find it to be very fascinating. When it comes to Mary Magdalene, I think of her as she heals by anointing, the same as any of the disciples of Jesus did. They healed by anointing. They dispelled demons. They were tasked with tossing out demons from other people. And so I know that about her. Something else I think about her is
wait. Were they the same kind of demons that you were just talking about?
That's a question that I'm deepening into, and I'm still researching. I think this is probably where my thesis rests with my master's degree, is something around here, because that I don't know, right? Because I'm still deepening into that a bit.
Okay. Pick up where you left off.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah,
thanks for letting me interrupt you.
Yeah, well, that's a larger discussion, right? Because that really is a larger discussion. Because when I've been reading this weekend, when I was driving out to OKC with my dad, I was reading Carl Jung, because Carl Jung was talking about evil, and Carl Jung has this, extreme discourse around archetypes and getting into the underworld of the human psyche. And there's this whole mythic belief about underworld travel that is, and it's like underworld travel, but it's like not necessarily hell, right? Because we're not talking about hell, but the underworld of the psyche where our shadow rests, and what does it look like?
Is that the same thing as shadow work?
It's very similar. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
In order to let's talk about a demon as a protector, right? So it's like, let's say as a young child, I had this particular situation that happened, and it deemed this part of me to not be safe. And so because that part of me I didn't get love from my caretaker. So I made that part of my shadow. I banished that part of me to the underworld in my psyche. And as I've gotten older and I need that part of myself that rests in shadow, there's underworld work that needs to be done there, because that protector, that persona that I had put on to keep myself safe, is now actually hindering me from making deeper connections with other people. So now it's a process of traveling to the underworld of my psyche to gain that to find that part of myself again and bring her to light and reconnect her into myself and bring myself into more wholeness, so that I can have a deeper experience and deeper intimate relationships with people. As an example, like that's one of the things that I'm like, this protector has got to be some sort of a demon. And what it didn't start that way, but it has now become that as I've gotten older and need to access larger parts of myself that are not available to me. And so like Carl Jung talks a lot about this, and I wonder, again, I'm not going to say that it is, but I wonder if that is part of the Magdalene work.
How would you find out?
Well, I'm always my number one test subject. So I've been doing some underworld journeys, and this has a lot to do with like I took over my 40th birthday when I did a trip out to Aravaipa, which is a canyon in Arizona, and it was a 4-day fast on a 3-day solo in the 3-day solo camping trip out in the middle of the desert. And a lot of it was ceremony based. And a lot of that work, all of that work that we were doing for that, it was a 11-day travel. The whole 11 days was all underworld and shadow work. And so there was a lot of conversation with Mary Magdalene out in the desert. That is work that I'm still working with today and still trying on.
Symbolic. That's very symbolic. Her and you in the desert brings up the memory of Jesus in the desert, working with what was called the devil and the temptations set before us.
Yeah, Jesus did 40 days. I only did 4. But I will say that that last day on the desert was my 40th birthday, if we want to bring some numbers into it for fun.
4 is your foundation number. That's the foundation number. So at least part of the meaning of that one. So that was very appropriate for you, and I suspect you did it on purpose.
It
You
was
gave it some thought.
a little on purpose. Yeah.
Yeah. But I find that interesting that you did it in that way. You could not have survived 40 days.
No, I don't think so either.
No.
Think so either.
I don't know anybody that, unless they had water with them, that they could survive for 40 days.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be done with support, with a team of with a team of support. But just going out in the way that Jesus did, I don't know if that would be the smartest thing.
No, people have tried.
I wouldn't doubt it. Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it.
Can you imagine the hallucinations, or what we would consider hallucinations, not visions? Let's be bolder and kinder and say visions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even on the last day of that 4-day fast, the rocks were talking to me. So it doesn't, I don't think it even takes 40 days, honestly. And there's a tremendous power in fasting. There really is a tremendous power in fasting. And that's one of the things that I've come to learn in even like the last year in my life. It's like, and the power to break addiction, the power to break habit, the power to go into prayer, in a time where you're also fasting. And each time that hunger pain comes up, granted you're drinking water, and that hunger pain reminds you of your prayer. And it's a really beautiful way to deepen into prayer, even for other people, not necessarily for yourself or mankind or, anything like that, to really be able to deepen into the understanding of our relationship with the non-physical and what really gives us and sustains life. Is not necessarily food and all of that, but there's something that is much more subtle that is always with us, that is asking for attention, and fasting can be a tremendous way to move back into that connection with that non-physical being.
Non-physical being. And what title or description would you put on the being? God?
Wow.
Something to think about.
The way that I've talked about it in sober yoga, because God, there's a couple of things I want to say about this. God has a way of bringing up stuff for people. And so the way that I once read it, that I thought was very helpful and kind of takes out the connotations, as it were, is generator, organizer, destroyer, GOD, generator, organizer, destroyer. I like that. Another thing that comes up when we ask that is what I read in feminist theology. Feminist theology spells God Godde, which is actually an Old English way of spelling God, and the way that in the feminist theologians talk about God, that is also the he and the she, that the Godde actually includes feminine goddess. So it's like this union between the two. And it kind of shakes off, like, because when you're reading Godde versus God, it hits and it touches a little bit differently. And so I've always liked and appreciated that as well. But as a definition, I also like something like the great whatever.
Great whatever. I love it.
The great whatever.
I have a suggestion for you. While you're working on your master's, listen to this talk. You've brought up some very interesting points that you probably have in your head, but could make them come alive a different way in your master's thesis. Sometimes we get so familiar with something, we take it for granted. It just is. It's part of us. We don't realize how important it could be to someone else's ears or eyes. Now, we're going to do 2 talks I've got out of this already. Maybe 3. No, I think demons can be included in 1. But you were reading about demons with Carl Jung. And of course, your circle of Mary Magdalene. That's 2 right there. If we broke out the demons, that can be an in-depth chapter to have people look at the word demon differently. Because when I think of, even now occasionally, when I think of a demon, I don't think of it as a useful tool and protector. I think of it as something that's after me. And of course, you have a universal imagery of all demons look like the devil. Do they? Are they his offspring? His or her offspring? Do they all look alike? And in what artist rendering? We don't know what that original energy looked like. We just don't. We've only got artist imagery that was created years and years and years later. But I think that would be an interesting talk within itself, just about demons. Our modern perception of what a demon is, whether it's a thought, a structure, an ideology, what is it? A different culture? Is it animate? Is that the right word? Or inanimate? Is that the right word? What is a demon? I loved your description a while ago about it being something that was protective and then it got in the way. So that's a thought or a feeling or whatever. And that may be an in-depth conversation for you to have with me or someone else or more than one, and then listen to yourself before you put your masters together. Same thing I have a feeling about Mary Magdalene. We were told we were told how all of the characters in the Bible, and I mean characters in a form of description, not cartoonish, I don't mean that at all, but we were introduced to John. He lost his head. So people think of John the Baptist as a bodiless person, served up because of a very selfish woman's comment. Bring me the head. And they did. Did that really happen? Did it? We have to accept the fact that it did. Just like we have to accept the fact that all of the people that are described and talked about in the Bible were indeed that way. You said something about Mary Magdalene a while ago. We were told that she was called a whore. She was called a prostitute. Was she? Where'd she get her money? Where did she get her money? Did she have money? Or were people just kind to her? Did they take care of her? What was her money? Was it sex? Prostitutes got paid, but they didn't always get paid in money. They got paid in favors. So what was real? And when you start talking about the circle of Mary Magdalene, bringing in Sophia, which is another interesting character in the Bible and known for her wisdoms, how did they fit together? Did they know each other? Did they share a hug at some point in time? You have so much knowledge in your head. I would love to hear talks about that. And if I'm honored enough to ask the silly questions and make the silly comments, but I know if I do that and I get answers, then those are answers for somebody else too.
Yeah.
In conversation. And sometimes I can play, as they used to say, the devil's advocate. Really? Because of the work I do. And in the tarot cards, there is a devil card, and there is a hermit card, and there is a judgment card, and there is the Hierophant, and the justice card in the major arcana cards, just like there is the Ten of Pentacles, which is the Kabbalah, which is all about the Jewish religion. And within that card, there are angel names, and there are astrology assignments, and there are paths to walk, and very complicated card, one you can study all your lifetime. And some Jewish people have. So depends on what sect they're in. But I think we can have some very interesting conversations. Want to try it?
Absolutely.
I have circled demons. Carl Jung, you mentioned that. Include what we will. I have circled the Council of Mary Magdalene. I've circled numerology. There's a lot of numerology in the Bible.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, so that's a circle within itself. So already that's 1, 2, 3, maybe 4.
If we talk about demons, I feel it only necessary to have a small conversation on the backside of that, talking about angels.
Absolutely. I'm with you there. I'll write that. Run under devil and circle it too. So, public, I think we're starting a series here. What do you think, girl?
Let's do it.
I think we're starting a series. And you can have a little section all your own. Nicole's series. And then you can use those any way you want to. I'm sneaky, right? Then you can go on and use those any way you want to on your social stuff, which I think would be more content for you to have. Which means, of course, some of that would go in the books that you're going to write later. Aren't I sneaky?
In the best kind of way.
Is there anything else you want to talk about today that we didn't cover already?
I can get little things here and there, but I feel like they'll all find their way out with some of these things that we have circled for the future.
Make a list. Send it to me. I would like to say a big, huge, grateful thank you for your time and your expertise on so many levels. And I'm really looking forward to these discussions. They're going to be fun, public, because she does have a good sense of humor. And my silliness about what I do and don't know will, I hope, but sometimes it's about my guide saying, ask this. Okay, I'll ask that. And then we'll go from there, because I certainly do not have the level of expertise that Nicole has. It's all about her. She's the shining star. So, angels. That was the other one. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, at least, sessions to schedule. It's going to be fun, Nicole. I'm so excited.
I'm excited. I'm super excited. What's so exciting is it gives me inspiration and reason to dive deeper. Like, because these things are interesting for me, like very interesting. There's only so much time in a day, but knowing that we're going to have a conversation, I'm like, oh no, we need to get into this.
And for me too, because I have to do research too, because in spite of my silliness, I'd like to be able to ask intelligent questions as well, and questions that our public may want to ask, so we can include that. Is your studio open today?
Today is Monday. Today is Tuesday. We are, yes. I teach Pilates in a short time, about an hour and a half.
Well, then I need to let you go and get ready.
And thank you for your support. And thank you for inviting me here to have these conversations. I just absolutely love sitting across from you. It's been a long time since I've seen your face, and you look wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Never hurts to have a haircut. Put on some makeup.
It's true.
All right, sweetie. You have a good evening. Thank you again so much for everything.
Absolutely. You're
really
welcome.
Appreciate your time. And go have a great time in public. Don't forget to share a smile with somebody today. Mwah! Bye, sweetie.
Bye, Elaine.
Thank you for tuning into The Conversations with the Ancients, where we take you on a journey where you'll hear voices of metaphysicians from the past, as well as today's spirit mediums, healers, and others who show you a side of the paranormal you've never seen before. Remember to visit our website at conversationswiththeancients.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on Conversations with the Ancients.